Hi, everyone. I can't believe it is the fifth episode of Barely Conscious and Streaming. Today, I have Lia Lewis and London here. And Leah actually just graduated law school. And if you missed the title, we're here about first generation attorneys. And so Leah is like in the thick of it. Lisaann was in the thick of it about a year ago, and
Yeah.
she's kind of like eased into it. And you all know I'm an attorney, so you don't need me to explain myself. But Leah, can you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then Lisa, and you can just chime in after.
Sure.
Sure, no problem. So my name is Lia Lewis. I'm a recent graduate of Roger Williams University School of Law. I graduated in December. A little bit about myself. Before attending law school, I was a legal assistant, and I had two judicial internships before law school and one in law school. Now I just recently took the bar in February, and today I took the NYLE.
Oh,
So
girl, I didn't know that was today.
yeah,
Woo! We're gonna get into that.
okay.
All right, Lisa.
Well, I am Lisaann London. Most people call me Lisa. I am a Brooklynite, like thick and thick of it. I am one of six girls to immigrant parents. I attended Toro Law for my JD, which I graduated last year. I went to John Jay for my undergrad, and then I took a few years off. I was a legal assistant, then paralegal, working in Queens County. So I've always sort of kind of been into public interest, which is why I'm a public interest attorney today. And I'll get a little bit more into me, but I want to drop a fun fact in here now that in between that lull of not being in law school and graduating from undergrad, I was also a kickboxing instructor. So I did that for about 5 years, and now we're here being an
Oh, that's
Esquire.
awesome. Oh, wow. I forgot about that fact about you. We're definitely going to talk about that. We're going to find a way to work that in. Um, so, ladies, thank you for being here tonight. I think it's so important for people to share their stories. And so, what I'm really interested in us talking about tonight is, our journey as first generation attorneys for each of our individual families. I know for me in particular, like I am like the first lawyer between two families, and then you kind of like flank out, and even within like my friend groups, like my really close friends, I'm the first attorney in that like wider ecosystem too. And I actually started thinking about that more recently because I feel like that's something we don't normally think about, like how we intersect even with our extended, and like borrowed families, if you will. And so like for me, like I always tell people like I was the hope deferred for my family because my dad wanted to be an attorney, but I was born the year he was supposed to like go to law school. And so he had to completely kind of like change his life. And then like my parents ended up splitting. My mom came to America because she felt like my older sister and I were too smart for where we lived at the time, and just got in her head that like she needed a bigger pond for us. And like when I moved to the States, I knew, like I kind of had in my head like I'm gonna be standing on mommy's shoulders. And so like although she never pressured me to be anything, but it was clear that everyone expected me to be something, anything that I wanted to be, but it was kind of evident like there were high expectations. And so maybe kind of talk about what kind of expectations there were of you, and also like when you decided those expectations aligned with your own expectations, and how you navigated it, especially in that time when you weren't actually headed to like directly to your goal, because I feel like sometimes we don't really talk about that enough, I feel. So that in between
Well,
time. Yeah, so Lisa, take us off.
so I feel like we're living the same life. I am the first lawyer in my family on both sides. I
Hmm.
am the first college grad. I'm the first high school grad. I am the first
Mm.
law school grad. And that I think speaks volumes to the expectation level
Mhm.
of seeing
Mhm.
someone hit those goals in your family and think that it wasn't even possible. So right now I'm
Yeah.
living my ancestors' wildest dreams. My
Mhm.
father also wanted to be an attorney. He's no longer in the States now. He's back in Guyana, but
Mhm.
he didn't have the opportunity to fulfill that dream as
Yeah.
well. So although at the time I didn't know it, I am now living his wildest dreams. And
Mhm.
it's sort of kind of like a full circle moment. And even becoming an attorney now and actually living in the Esquire
Yeah.
lifestyle, there are still a lot more expectations that fall from it because you not only become the lawyer, become the attorney, you have to be a
Mhm.
successful one at that too,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then you become the family attorney and the friends of the family attorney. You
Mhm.
know, like my mom will be in the store. She was in the grocery store and she was just like, "Wait, hold on, let me get my daughter on the phone." And she called me while I was at work. Like, "Hold on, I have somebody with a legal question." I'm just like, "Mom, it doesn't work like that." So it was difficult to navigate. And I would be honest with you guys, I never saw myself at a young age becoming an attorney.
Mm.
I actually thought I was going to be a pediatrician. I love kids. I'm the
Mhm.
second oldest daughter, so I held, I was responsible for a lot of caregiving for my younger
Yeah.
siblings. So I always thought that I was going into the medical field. And then, everybody would always say, "Lisa, you talk too much and you love to debate and you always go back and forth with somebody. You need to be a lawyer." And I was just like, you know what? I think I do need to be a lawyer. And then I got more into debating, mock trial in
Mhm.
high
Mhm.
school, and I loved it. I loved being the talking piece. I
Yeah.
loved, defending people. I was always that person to defend people. I did not like
Mm.
bullies in school. So I was that girl, when
Yeah.
it came down to speaking up and being outspoken. So, I mean, I think it kind of just ran its course, and I
Mhm.
ended up just living with what felt right, which was to be paid to litigate, right?
No, that's
And
awesome.
I love it. I have no regrets right now. I think my family is still in awe. My mom tells me, "Babe, I'm so proud of you." She called me randomly, like,
Oh.
"Mommy's so proud of you. Mommy's so proud of you." And I love that. I love being my
Mhm.
sister's role model. I love being that person for my friends as well. I have friends, and I think we'll talk about it at some point in our discussion, but I
Yeah.
have friends that never even imagined knowing an attorney. I didn't know an
Mhm.
attorney when I was growing up. So just
Yeah.
being able to have someone in close proximity to be able to say,
T-
"Hey, let me run a legal question by you," or even just,
Exactly.
give them motivation to continue it on their path, even though it might not be legal.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
that I hold a beacon of hope for my friends and my family. So I enjoy that. The
Yeah.
expectations, it's a little heavy, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that, Lisa. I think, like, we don't realize when we're like the pioneer, like what that means sometimes. And so, like, I think I'm glad that you talked about some of that because, like, we end up just being like hope for a lot of people, right? People who have their dreams are still deferred, right? And so it's
Right.
like seeing somebody else get to their oasis in the desert. That to me is refreshing, even on like the hardest day when you're not getting when you might be that person who's not getting what you want. Just seeing somebody else get what they want, gives you the hope that, what, like, I'm gonna keep going. Like, there's hope for me yet. I think that's so important. So, Leah, tell us a little bit about your journey to law school. We'll get into your law school shenanigans soon enough, but um,
So I actually grew up in family court system.
mhm,
So I knew since I was 6 years old that I wanted to be an attorney.
mm,
This is no dig, but I did not like the way I was represented as a child.
mhm,
So I just always felt like I didn't have a voice. And
yeah,
I took that experience with me where I made something that would have been deemed a negative, a positive.
mhm,
So I just remember just being like, and I told my mom this, I was like, I hated the way I was represented. I felt like I was silenced. I felt like my voice didn't
mm,
matter. And it's so funny. We learn in family law, like, oh, everything's in the best interest of the child. But when the
mm,
child's voice is not being heard, how is it the best
yeah,
interest? So that stuck with me. And then when I got into high school, I actually joined the student defense club at my school,
Mm,
in which I was actually representing students, along like myself,
yeah.
who, whether it was like getting in trouble, whether it was grades, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to I went to York, where you were my professor, and I remember me telling you about like, oh, I wanted to go to law school. You was like, go for it. And it was my last year. And I was like, I think I'm gonna take my LSAT. And he was like, I just took the LSAT. And I was just like, okay. um, I ended up though a while at York just having a judicial internship. That's where I got like
Mm,
my first, like I guess you could say my feet wet
yeah.
into this lovely judicial system that we have. And it's so funny because I was like, no, I'm going to go to the Queen's DA's office. I know what I wanted to do. And my professor, shout out to Professor Daniels, he was like, no, I think you will benefit from going to family court in Queens. And I was just like, why? And he
Mm-hmm.
was like, no, I think you will benefit from it. And that's where I got like my introduction into interning for a judge, and I loved it.
Mm,
It just spoke volumes. I wouldn't say like healed, but it actually like revealed things about myself, what I was willing to do, making sure that this was a career path that I wanted to take.
mm-hmm.
Fast forward to again, I worked for 5 years before going to law school. That was the LSAT journey. Thank God that
Mm-hmm.
is over.
Hmm.
Um,
I
and
feel that.
yeah, taking the LSAT, I had to retake it. Everything happened on God's timing. So fast forward to I ended up at Roger Williams. Just being in law school in Rhode Island was totally different from being in law school in law school, being in school in New York, just because I was the minority.
Mm,
I went to York, so we were in the
yeah.
minority there. And while at Roger Williams, I had the beauty of one serving on the Bolsa board with Lisaann. Um, I also had the beauty of having another judicial internship, which I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely loved. Although I do not like property law, I thought it was very interesting. Um, and then I graduated. So
Mm-hmm.
my law school journey was interesting. And we'll get into that later, but that's how I got my foot in the road. But as for standards, my mom is an assistant principal, and my mom always said to me, and my sister, and I'm pretty sure my sister's watching this, she would say, how do I look being educated? My children are dummies. You will not be dummies. And I was just like, oh, no problem. So I come from a background where every generation is supposed to be better than the last.
Mm-hmm.
So my parents instilled that in myself and my sisters. And just like you were saying, I am one of six girls to be exact. So I understand where we come from, where it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of us. So with that, like the standards were very hard. It was very high. In my mom's house, a 75 was not passing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so but I'm grateful for the experience. I'm
Yeah.
grateful for like, even my mom is still in that in me. I feel like now I won't accept just the standard. Like I try
Just
to
to be
Mm-hmm.
able to.
yep.
No, and I think that's important. And you know what? Like last week I had a conversation with, Dr. Jade Singleton, where we talked about what it meant to be the first, right? And
Mhm.
a lot of times when you're coming in, there's a lot of comparison that happens, right? Because
Mhm.
like you're on the one hand, these people are your peers, but on the other
Mhm.
hand, they're really not your peers because you haven't had the same experiences, right? Like the only thing that's similar about you is that you happen to be in law school or you happen to be at a firm with them or at a clerkship with them. But like,
Absolutely.
I remember when I was in law school, I did a 2-year program at Brooklyn Law,
Mhm.
and I remember there were people in my section who had parents that were lawyers and judges, and like they were like the fifth lawyer in their family. And there was somebody reviewing their memos and their briefs and going through their, helping them with mock interviews. Like they had the blueprint of what they
Right.
needed to do to kind of set themselves up for success. And then
Mhm.
here I come, little miss. Oh yeah. I was supposed to go to law school in 2009 and it's 2017 and I'm here. I'm just here for my paper. Um, you know, like not even, like not even thinking. And it's so funny that you said like you there were high standards, and it was funny because by the time I went to law school, I had 2 advanced degrees. And so there was kind of nothing for me to prove by going to law school. I was also a professor too, which like my family was I was the first in my family to be a professor at a college, at like a major college
Collegiate
system
level,
too.
right?
And so it was one of those things where like I had nothing to prove. So really going to law school was just me like fulfilling my purpose at the end of the day. And I say that because I remember day one, like I just felt it was like the first environment that I was sitting in a classroom setting, and people are gonna like be like, "Oh my God, she's so like psychotic," but whatever. Um, like I felt it was like the one place I felt safe, if that makes sense. Like where I felt like if I had an opinion, like no one was gonna berate me. Like I was among quote unquote intellectual peers, right?
Right.
And the thing about being among intellectual peers is you go from being the best of the best of the best of the best to being just like everybody else.
Right.
um, and so I want to talk about like that transition because I know you guys had that transition too, where you went from
Absolutely.
like I'm amazing to I'm just regular like y'all, and like and talk about like what that felt like, how you coped with it, like what were some of the things you did on your own to cope with it, like who did you need to talk to have your come to Jesus moment where you just stop looking at everybody. I want to know. So Lisa, like talk about that, like talk about
I'll first piggyback off of something that you said
mhm
in regards to being in law school. I also went to PWI, and you are the standout, right?
mhm
And I decided to not make that be a negative thing, right? I don't
mhm
mind standing out, right? I love to
mhm
be face forward, forward facing, always in the spotlight, always for good things, obviously, but
I know,
because
good attention only, thank
good
you.
attention only. But I realized that I did have 1 year was like a whirlwind. It was like a shell
Mhm
shock. I was just like, oh my God. And there was a moment in time where I felt myself comparing because I did have colleagues
mhm
who were on yachts on the weekend and studying, the next day, or
yeah
going to their dad's firm or going to their
mhm
grandfather's firm that their parents worked at, and now they're about to go, work there for the 1 L
right
summer, so they didn't even have to worry about interviews. And here I am, just trying to get my papers together to
mhm
figure out, who do I need to go talk to in the careers department to help me
yeah
go through my elevator pitch or my, questions that I want to answer, or, put my resume together,
mhm
for a legal professional resume,
yeah
not just a
yeah
regular resume, right? Learning things along the way, right? It wasn't easy, but I felt like, okay, if I can't stand out necessarily for smart, because all of us are smart because we're
yeah
here, we're all occupying
yeah
the same space. So I used that to say, okay, well, what else can I thrive in? See, everybody else is smart, but not everybody likes to talk. Not everybody likes to
mhm
be the person that answers the questions or raise their hand
yeah
when the professor is cold calling on someone else that doesn't want to do the case brief review, right?
mhm
So I made it to my point. Okay, well, I'm just gonna always talk. So now
mhm
the thing that's gonna make me distinct between me and my colleagues is the fact that they're gonna be able to place a face to the name, right? They're
mhm
going I'm not just
yeah
gonna be the black woman that's in the court,
exactly
right? I am gonna be the person that speaks the most, the person that knows
mhm
the case that the judge is, the professor is referring to, or the person that's volunteering all the time,
yeah
right? I did so many pro bono hours. I can't even tell you how much pro bono hours I did in school, right? I took advantage of all of the internships. I met professors during lunch so that I could stand out because
mhm
I knew, although I was in the top 25% of my class, not to pat myself on the back,
pat
uh,
yourself, girl, pat yourself.
I definitely wanted to be known for something other than just attending law school,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It, for me being a first, it was big, and it's big in our world, but to everyone else,
Mhm.
it's just like, okay, well, you're the first.
It's
That's
like
not really a good
yeah.
thing. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? It's like, well, I'm the fifth, right? And
Yeah.
I already know what this looks like. I don't have to do as much work as you do. And I'm not saying that they don't work hard or anything like that. I'm not trying to take away from them, but it was a very different
Yeah.
journey,
And it's
right?
easier when you have support. Like we can't disregard the fact that like having people who've been where you are currently walking
Mm-hmm.
that
It's
just
my
it
favorite.
just gives you way more peace, because instead of you now having to reinvent the wheel because you don't know where to go pick up a wheel, like,
Mm-hmm.
you have somebody who's like, oh, I did this, here's what you need to do, oh, fix that, do that, oh, go
Right.
talk to that guy, and so, no, I think that's so important to say. And I really loved what you said, Lisa, about everyone being smart. I think that's like something that a lot of people end up forgetting when they go to law school, because of how competitive it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very easy to like get in your own head and think you're not good enough or whatever. I mean, I think I got like my first like B's in like a really long time, my first semester of law school. And I remember being like, what? And we had a curve. We actually had a curve at my law school, and I didn't know how the curve worked. My only experience with a curve before law school was in my physics class in undergrad. Where I was
Mm-hmm.
pre med. We could talk about that another day. Um, and like that physics class, none of us knew what Professor Toon was saying. The fact that I remember his name should speak volumes. It's been a while since I had that class. And and I remember like we were so bad at physics that the highest grade I think was like probably like a 55, like raw score. And and like how he did his curve was just add the missing numbers to the first grade, that's the A plus, and so on and so forth. So I ended up with a B plus in physics as a result, but like I'm pretty sure I only knew like 35% of what I needed to know. you know um but that's not how the curve worked in law school. It was like levels to a curve, where it was like, oh, we only give like 10 A's,
Yeah.
and then like 15 B's, and like, and you could get a 90 raw score but still be a B.
Yeah.
And I remember having that moment. And so, like, Leah, like, since it's more fresh in your head, I want to know, like, was there a curve at your law school? and
Yes.
and how did you, like, were you familiar with what it was going to look like before you got there? And like, tell us about the shell shock of that.
Okay, so my school, the curve was actually a B minus, which set me through the roof because I was just like a B minus. Like, so after that, it's just a C. There's
Yeah.
no like in between. Like, it's just
Mm-hmm.
B minus, C plus. And I think one thing, like, Lisaann, and I agree with you saying, is everyone's smart. So it's like, how do you now show that I am better, right? I
Mm-hmm.
was a person, again, 5 years before going to law school. So I had to relearn how to study. I had to
Same.
relearn how to write. Because in law school, there's no such thing as beautiful language. Get to the point and call it a day. um, and for me, it was like, that B minus curve really was a shock to me because when I got my first semester grades, I remember being in my class and I just cried and I was like, I am not dumb. And I am not dumb. And you have those thoughts because you're like, well, I said the same thing as this person. So what made them get this grade and I'm here?
Mm-hmm.
One thing I learned throughout that process is, comparison is the thief of joy.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You will never be satisfied with yourself or see your own improvement if you have your eyes on someone else and what someone else is doing
Mm.
or what someone else has.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can just bring up, I remember like my first semester where I actually went to my professor and was just like, what did I do to get a C plus? This was legal writing. And I was like, what did I do to get a C plus? And she was like, oh, well, you didn't do these assignments. And I'm like, no, I did. And she's like, oh, wait, you were actually supposed to have a B in this class. And I looked at her and I was like, do you know the emotional turmoil that I just went through? Like thinking that I was a C plus in this class and you're telling me I actually had a B. And my professor, although, like my school's one of those schools where they don't care, like whatever grade is your grade, it still was a simple fact that like I learned to advocate for myself even in that moment because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
as one else you feel like you don't have a voice or you feel like, no, I can't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to your initial question, how did I manage it? One, I did what Lisaann did. I'm gonna be honest. I joined being on a DEI, one LDEI rep for my school. I've joined clubs. I hated public speaking, so cold calling was not my thing. But I made sure I knew what it was that they was asking for, because sometimes in law school, like everybody would have the same answer, and then I remember my contracts professor, she will always look for the little nuances. And once I
Mm,
picked up on that, I was like, oh yeah, pay extra, pay extra care to like this little thing or this
mhm.
little topic. So yeah, that's my journey.
Yeah, no, I mean, so one of my favorite things about law school happened after I got hit by a car in law school. So I was like crossing the street going to contracts one morning. I always tell people the story would be better if I was headed to torts, because then it could be like a whole thing. But you know, you stick to the facts, right? That's something we learn in law school when we're writing. You gotta use the facts you get, even if it's bad facts, right? And so I was heading to contracts, and I actually got hit by a car in the middle of a crosswalk. It was the first time in a very long time I was not jaywalking. And so like it kind of hurts still that that happened. Also the first person. Oh, actually no, I think somebody else was hit by a car in my family, so I can't have that honor as well. Um, but I digress. My favorite thing was I ended up having to like switch my seat in law school. I prefer sitting in the front because I get distracted easily. And I've never been diagnosed with anything, but I love people watching. So like I'm that person in class. Like if I am not like clear clear eye contact with the professor, I'm gonna be out here like coming up with stories in my head about like the people in class. And so I remember I actually got forced out of my seat the first semester, my front row seat, by like these two gunners in the class. I swear I wasn't a gunner, but I like looking back, I'm like, you were too. Like I was like a more like undercover gunner. And I remember I was really infuriated by them, and I ended up just like going to like all we had like these auditorium style classrooms, and so
Mhm.
I ended up moving to like the far back left side of the room, like stage left, if you will. And every time, and so like I participated in class because I'm a speed reader, so I would read all the cases. I would read all the cases that were mentioned in the cases, and then I would read the stuff in the back too. Um, I was, but I
You got me
wasn't a,
beat.
but I wasn't a gunner. I wasn't a gunner though. And then once I got to con law, that was the semester I got hit by a car. Like I was obsessed with that professor, so I started like reading excerpts from other stuff he would write. So I was that kid in his class, and I remember it was like the craziest thing because we would get into these like conversations in the class, just me and the professor, and I already told you where my seat was.
Right.
And literally, he would say something, they would look at him. I would answer, they would like it was like the entire class like back and forth. And like I feel like for most people that would be really intimidating, but I remember when like the first time it happened in my head, I was like, "Oh, you must be talking right now," you know. And like I feel like I kind of dug in more, where people would kind of be. I remember one lesson in particular. He was kind of like the professor. People were clearly confused because we were talking about the stuff in the back
Mhm.
and like additional reading that he didn't expect anybody else to do, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And he was like, "Oh yeah, I know, we're just discussing XYZ." But it was like, but we literally were talking. I'll never forget that class, like maybe like 15 minutes
Wow.
back and forth. And I went on to become his research assistant. You know,
Very
but
fitting. Very fitting.
but like, and for me, it was like it was kind of like playing up to my strengths, right? Like I may not be like the quickest person, like like I had to handwrite my exams because like I would get distracted typing. Like I would be
Mhm.
like, oh, this is so noisy, I can't focus, and then like that's it. And so I ended up having to handwrite, and like my grade, like they found out that's why my grades were so low because I got distracted while like typing.
Mhm.
But like I just hand wrote my exams moving forward, and like you, I was like top 25% when at the end of graduation, I was top 25%, and I was like, wow, like for starting out where I did and getting hit
And
by a
then
car and
mhm.
and kind of all the stuff that happened in between and still being able to do that, like I think that's something we have to be proud of, like everything that we've done, especially as first generation, right? And so I want to talk about, like you said you did extracurricular activities. And so I want to know,
Too
I
many.
want to like what was that like? I'll share mine, but I want you guys to share yours first because I don't know, I feel like mine's a bit dramatic and it'll just like kill the mood. So we need to hear some happiness from you from you guys.
I think I did almost everything that I could get my hands on. I was vice president of Family Law Society, co-president of Black Law Students Association. I was New York Metro for Balsa sub-regional director. I
Mm,
was a student ambassador. I was on the Trial Advocacy and Honor Society program.
mm.
I was a coach for mock trial. Um,
You was
I
doing the most, girl. I'm
I was doing
tired.
the most and not sleeping. Okay, I do not recommend. I mean, it was a great experience. Honestly,
Mhm.
I don't have any regrets about being
Mhm.
hands on in so many
Yeah.
associations, and I think that helped me build a name for myself and make the
Mhm.
connections with other legal professionals, which also goes back to the first thing that we talked about, is not really having lawyers or attorneys, judges,
Yeah.
et cetera, in our families. So I built my support system. I built
Mhm.
my team, and don't get me wrong, my family is right. They're writers, right? My family,
Yeah.
my friends, they're writers. It's just that they didn't really know the legal world or what it is
Yeah.
that I needed to do. So when I needed the support or the should I do this, not that kind of
Mhm.
discussions, I reached out to folks that I've met along the way while I was in law
Yeah.
school. So I think in that regard, I was very grateful to be able to be a
Mhm.
part of those associations, and even now being invited back to speak on panels and, you
Mhm.
know, do other programming with some of the people that I've been able to cross paths with. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed that. However,
It's a big
however,
however, girl.
however, I felt like I was overcompensating a little bit
Mhm.
because I felt like I didn't have
Mm.
the other things that some of my colleagues had, right? Um, I'm sure that they were able, talking about law school exams,
Yeah.
that was a very different way of taking exams for me,
Mhm.
right? The time, the crunching, the studying. I also took years off before going to law
Mhm.
school. So I was far removed from studying, reading on that sort of level
Mhm.
every every night. It
Mhm.
was very different for me. So making friends in the associations that I did and making connections, I had a lot of folks help me along the journey, but I was tired, I was drained, and I felt like sometimes I was losing myself in
Mhm.
trying to balance so many things at the same time. And although I didn't really let it interfere with my grades, I felt like mentally it was taking a toll on me
Mhm.
because I was not sleeping. I was up all night trying to study, and then I was prepping and programming and doing a whole bunch of other things.
Mhm.
So, you know how they say you can't be your best self in so many different departments. Something you're eventually
Mhm.
going to fall
Mhm.
short in some department. I felt like I was falling short with myself, and I didn't really
Mhm.
like that towards the end of being in
Yeah.
law school. So, I mean, it was bittersweet. Still no
Mhm.
regrets. But if I could tell someone else, I would tell them, maybe try to figure out how to navigate law school
Mhm.
first, especially during that 1L year and while you're in the thick of it and really trying to
Yeah.
find your sea legs before jumping in and trying to be all hands on deck with everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's
No,
pretty much what I would
no,
have to
I
say
think
about
that's
that.
really good advice. I feel like, and I'm so glad you said that because I feel like a lot of times, especially as like Black women, we gloss over a lot of the extra things we do, or we kind of make it seem like, oh yeah, no, that's just like in the bag or whatever. But like
Hmm.
ultimately, there's like real burnout that can happen doing a lot of these extra things, right? And so I love the advice that you have for people that, maybe starting law school later this year, like, you know, like find your footing first. Like don't feel like you need to join stuff. Don't feel like you need to be hanging out with, everybody and trying to be like Mr. or Mrs. Congeniality. Like it's okay to like find your own footing first before you start kind of like letting people into your space, because the
Right.
more people you have in your space, the more, responsibilities you ultimately end up kind of like taking on, whether or not you're in clubs too. I mean, I had a mentee who like she ended up like dating a guy who ended up like getting sick during the time, and now like she went on a couple of dates with this guy, and now she feels obligated because she doesn't
To
want to
help
look
her.
like because she doesn't want to look like a mean girl, or
Hmm.
selfish or whatever. But at the same time, it was like, well, you only went on like 3 dates with him. Like that's a huge responsibility to take on as somebody that's new. And so, like, really figuring out like the boundaries that you need
Hmm.
for yourself, and sticking to your boundaries, I think is so important as well.
It's not
Especially,
being selfish; it's being selfless. And I had to learn
yeah,
that. I definitely had to learn that.
and ultimately it's like you having self-love, right? Like you deciding like, no, like I'm the priority right now, and
Hmm.
everything else, because let's be honest, like as you were growing up, you already taking care of people, you're already being like, you were just supporting actresses in other people's lives, right? And
Absolutely.
now you're the main character, like you finally got the lead part, like you're Meryl Streep, you're Viola,
Uh
right?
huh.
And so it's like, I know, like after I said I love Meryl Streep, she's like in my head right now, but but like you're Viola, you're Lupita, right? And so like you don't have time to like go try to be, the maid. You don't have time to do that. You don't have time to be the babysitter. You don't, whether it's babysitting your friend, because guess what? You pay money for school too, you
And
know?
I just want to touch on that really, really quickly because I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that it's talked about enough being the first, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we all come from, you know, experiences or families where you have a responsibility to uphold. Like being,
Mm-hmm.
right, Lee and I are both, one of
Yeah.
six, right?
Mhm.
And being that I was the first in a lot of aspects, I was also a very supportive role to my family,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mhm.
backbone, if you will
Mm-hmm.
say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of discussions with my families. I gave them time slots, like, hey, okay, 9 to 5, 10 to 11, I could call
Mm-hmm.
you. On the weekend, we'll talk about that. But during the week,
Mm-hmm.
we can't do this. And I think that was the very first time in my life where I had to turn off being so available. And
Mm-hmm.
not just talking about boundaries, but that also had a very emotional toll on me because I
Yeah.
felt like I was disappointing the people that I once
Mm-hmm.
showed up the most for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And although I didn't speak about it as much, I do feel like sometimes I wanted to be present. You want to be there for your best friend's
Yeah.
birthday or for your
Yeah, like
sister's
I
get
want to
together,
go. Like,
right? But you find yourself saying no, and sometimes people don't understand why
mm-hmm.
that no is coming. So
Mm-hmm.
it is hard to navigate that, just being someone that's being going through this experience for the first
Yeah.
time and explaining that to someone who has never been through this experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes it's hard for them to comprehend. So you have that battle with yourself, but you're also having that battle with people that you love for them to
Yeah.
understand something that they ultimately never experienced. So it's really
Yeah.
hard.
No, no, for sure. And so, like, Leah, like, I want to hear about your experience with, programming at your school. And, like, and since Lisa already touched on it, like, talk about some of like just like the mental, crises you found yourself in,
Mhm.
that you feel comfortable sharing, and like, and what you did to navigate it, like what kind of support you felt you had and that kind of thing.
Sure. So, like Lisaann, again, like I said, I was the one over for DEI initiatives at my school. I was the vice president of the Intellectual Property Club in my school. I was the one over for BOSA at my school. And then on top of then planning a convention for over 400 people second year was a lot. Um, the mental toll, what I would say is one thing that Lisaann said that I definitely agree with, and you said that creating boundaries, what is healthy boundaries? I
Mhm.
think when we take on a lot of things, like people only see what they want and not
Mhm.
what actually we are going through. Whether you're, doing one thing or several things, I think
Mhm.
it's important to create those boundaries. So for me, like I can attest to just when I was planning a convention. Like I was planning a
Mhm.
convention. I also was doing 30 hours a week for internship and a full-time student. That
Mhm.
was a lot. And I just remember having a conversation with one individual and they asked me, they were like, "You're not nervous?" And I was like, "No." And that was a shock to them. And I
Mhm.
was like, "Well, why do you want me to be nervous?" And they were like, "Well, because it's a lot." And I'm like, "Well, when you plan for things and when you have a
Mhm.
good team that is helping you shouldn't be nervous." The one thing I
Mhm.
learned from 1L year, even just working, and I think just growing as an individual, is what you put out there, you will reap. So
Mhm.
for me, I was big on planning. I was big on communication. I like to overly communicate at times. I would just remember one time at the convention when I was like, "Lisaann, go upstairs. You studying for the bar." And she was like,
Mhm.
"I'm fine. I got this." I was like, "No, Lisaann, go upstairs. You studying for the bar."
Mhm.
Like, because my focus was just like making sure like this is what,
Yeah.
we all came to school to be an attorney. And she is an
Mhm.
attorney. And I'm pretty sure she is rocking it. So my thing is like with that is just like for me, like mental wise, I'm a Christian. I believe in God and I believe in prayer, but sometimes you have your human moments where you
Mhm.
are like, "You know what, Lord, your children, it's just making me go crazy." And I just remember like a lot of my experiences came from Negroes. So I feel like that's what a lot of the growing had to happen for
Mhm.
me. Whether it was maturity, whether it was learning how to effectively communicate.
Yeah.
And I just remember like me calling my sister, who was also on the line, and me calling my friend Tiara. I would write her in her DMs like, "This is what's going on at this convention." And I just remember them like just pouring into me and just
Mhm.
like whether it was my sister praying with me. And although
Mhm.
sometimes like that prayer doesn't work, it's comfort in knowing that you have somebody that you could just be yourself. I
Mhm.
believe in being your true self. And just being able to articulate and ask for help, especially as Black women, we feel like we're trained and taught like you're supposed to be able to endure this
Mhm.
toxicity or endure this type of pain. And I feel like that's why I'm very big on therapy. So go to therapy if you feel because it is a lot that you are dealing with. It is a lot.
Mhm.
One, you're learning different people, you're learning yourself, you're
Mhm.
learning like, and as you're getting older, like I went to law school and I was a little bit older, so it's like everyone thinks like, "Oh, you're here," and you're like, "No, I'm right here with you, like we're
Right.
right here."
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
so just like learning how to, one, my biggest thing was just learning how to communicate,
Yeah.
because I had to realize it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Now,
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I do believe that sometimes like when people have or already have like a perspective about you, they're gonna they're gonna hear what you're saying,
Yeah.
you hear
Yeah.
whatever tone they want to. I had to learn how to not be sensitive too.
Mhm.
Because sometimes I would feel like, "Oh, well, like you're doing this to hurt me." And it's like, "No, you're not doing this to hurt me." Sometimes I'm all for constructive criticism, but sometimes it's like it's not what you say, it's how you saying it.
Mhm.
And I had to learn to forgive also,
Mhm.
because sometimes I would internalize a lot and I would just keep it to myself. And
Mhm.
I would just be like, "I'm doing this to these people and they don't appreciate me." And the one thing, like my sister said to me, my mom said to me is, if you're doing something out of the goodness of your heart, it doesn't matter if you get the recognition. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if
Absolutely.
someone tells you kudos, you're doing a good job. Because one, if you're doing it for God's glory, and I'm sorry to bring up God, but I'm a Christian.
Oh,
If you're
don't be
doing
sorry, girl. I love Jesus too. So
I'm a God fearing woman, so you all good
yeah.
over
okay.
here.
Yeah, we love Jesus on this, you know.
And when you're doing it, it's about like the kingdom business. What are you doing, right? Like, what are you doing? Are you doing this for your self gratitude, or are you doing
Mhm.
this to help other people? So for me, like joining a bunch of clubs, like I also understand Lisaann, where it was like I felt like sometimes I needed to do these things to be like to know who I am. But after a while, like when I got into my third year, I did absolutely nothing. Like I only had one semester left, and I was like, "Ooh, bar prep." um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was a lot, and learning myself and knowing who I am and being comfortable with knowing like, hey, even though like you guys are top 25, I was not top 25. But
Girl, it
I
don't
knew,
matter. Nobody
no,
cares about
I
your
knew
grades
that
once you
like
start working.
my reputation preceded me, so I
Mhm.
made good. Like I
Mhm.
believe in networking. My when anyone like speaks towards me, like people that I've worked with, people will always say like some people say good things, some people will say whatever they want to say. But when it came down to like making sure I had a network of people that I can like rely on, I made sure that whatever I put forth was my best foot forward. Not saying it was
Mhm.
perfect. And that's one thing I would tell people. I would like to give advice on. You do not have to be perfect. You
Mhm.
can strive for perfection, but you do not have to be perfect.
Right.
And
Because
it's
a lot of
impossible
it,
anyway. Yeah.
that is truly impossible. And sometimes we put this pressure on ourselves to be perfect. And I'm pretty sure Lisaann, you feel like I have to be perfect. I got to be top. I got to be this.
Mhm.
But it's like show yourself grace. And that was the hardest thing, showing myself grace in this
Yeah.
season.
Yeah.
Because as a person who's like, no, I feel like I should be here. And God's like, sweetheart, but I need you here. Character
Right.
development.
Mhm.
Stay on the potter's wheel. Like
Yeah.
for me, that was very huge. And I'm still learning it, like learning myself,
Mhm.
showing myself grace and understanding where I'm at and learning to be faithful in my season.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, if I could just like go into that real quick, just being
Oh
faithful
yeah,
in
I
my
know.
season.
Like, no,
Um,
that's right on point. We need to hear that
no,
because too
sometimes you
much
feel
going on
like
right now.
you're so focused on getting to the next that you're not appreciative of what you have right now.
Mhm.
You are living
Being
in a
present.
great moment. Yes, Lisa, you are
Mhm.
living in a moment that you wanted to be. And that
Yeah.
is something like everyone has constantly has reminded me, like, Leah, there was a point in time when you ain't know if you were getting law school, you didn't know
Mm-hmm.
what was going on. So
Mhm.
you're living in that moment and appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate the rest. And that's what you told me. Aubrey, you said
I
appreciate the
said
rest of
that.
what you start. It's like just don't stop it. And I didn't realize that until like I started like going on interviews and things like
Mhm.
that. I'm like, oh wait, I'm about to actually have to get back to work. Like, oh wait, I can go to the gym in the mornings like I wanted to. Like, oh, okay, now wait, let me pause real quick. But
Yeah.
learning to appreciate those little things that we take for granted.
Mhm.
Learning that,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, like communicating with your family on certain days, or being able to just like sleep. I did not understand sleep until after I took the bar. And when I say I have gotten some of the greatest sleep of my life, like it is a very trying time. It's a time where you're like, you know what? I don't know if I ate today, but this coffee and these crackers is going to do it for me. That like a learning to even appreciate that, because I remember I was crying to my mom. I was under a desk crying like, what?
Mm.
What did I get myself into?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was like, but you prayed for this woman. I was like, wait, I'm not trying to hear that right
Leave it
now.
to our moms, right?
Right? Like, I'm like,
Amen to that one.
I want to hear that. I was like, no, like I need to. This needs to be over with. And then, well, I sat for the bar and I was like, no, this needs to be over with because
Yeah.
ordained yourself is crazy. But what I would say is stay faithful in your season, enjoy it because that is time you will never get back
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
at all, and enjoy the good and the bad.
No, I think, oh my God, that is so on point. It's funny because I was actually talking to my mom earlier today.
Mhm.
And she was like, "Oh, like she was like, what did you do today?" Because I've been like meal prepping like a maniac. I think I was a chef in my last life. In fact, my family calls me Chef Giuliani. Um, and so I made some curry today.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I be out here, girl. I was, I had my curry chicken, and just white rice because you don't want to mess up the curry with nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
I got my roti skins ready to go. I didn't
Nice.
I
make
see
those from
you.
scratch though. I went to the Trini shop and picked up my roti skins. Um, you know, and then yesterday I made some pasta, so I was eating that when she came in, and I was like, "Oh, I made you some curry. Oh, there's some roast pork in the oven." And she was like looking at me like, "All right, is this all you did today?" And I was like, "No, like I did other stuff too. Like I'm trying to work out here, mom. But I'm actually being audited. My company is being audited right now, by by New York State Tax Authority, and so like." and honestly, New York State tax authority, I can't believe I'm recording this, but hey, um, New York State has managed to audit me every time I had to pay me more than like $1,000. It's decided, oh, you getting too much money back, and like it's a whole thing. And so like I have everything I need. It's so it's not one of those things where like I'm
You're nervous.
organized.
Right, you're
I'm about
good.
in fact, I was kind of like, didn't we send them all the paperwork? Like
Mm.
they're trying to play games. But it's okay. The money will come when it needs to come. And
Amen to
so,
that.
like, I was like, mom, I just always have like a lot of money, and right now I feel like my company is taking a lot of my money. you know but then like I caught myself complaining, and it was like right away like the switch, and I was like, yeah, but I'm not even like stressing that. Like right now I'm just trying to like make sure I get all the things I need to get done
Hmm.
now, so when it gets really busy again, like I'm not over here trying to catch up with the things that I should have been doing in the downtime, right?
Right.
And so that's where like the tax work, I was like going through the financials today. Like I was up at 6 a.m. going through financials. Like what? Nobody got
You
time for
had a
that.
busy day.
And so like I know people saw me on LinkedIn, kind of just cutting up, being, like I'm always doing. And probably were like, does this chick work? But like I was on UK time today, okay? Like give me a break. And so but all that to say, so for me, I'm actually a big boundaries girl. Like I was, like I feel like since I was a toddler, like my mom has like stories of me like being that kid that's like, don't touch my face. No, that
Hmm.
like my name is Aubria, like like correcting people,
Right.
and just kind of like always like being that kid who's like sticking up for myself or sticking up for other people. And so like and I really appreciate that, because I feel like in West Indian culture especially,
Mhm.
like that's not a norm for kids to have a voice. And
Right.
I feel like even my extended family allowed me to have a voice in a way
Yep.
that and really like most of the kids had that experience, and I think that like that really made us like more like better advocates, like braver
Hmm.
in in the public space. And so when I went to law school, it was also a predominantly white institution as well. I think maybe there were 30 black students across the
You had
That's
more
a
than
lot.
me.
That's
yeah.
more than my
Yeah,
class.
like 30 or 40. We I think we were about like 10% of the student population while I was there. So like a solid amount of kids. We also had like a really good like Hispanic community as well. And a lot of first generation people. So like that's what I
Mm.
love about Brooklyn Law School, Brooklyn. And so, for me, I was still teaching at York College at the time, like
Go
just
York.
doing like a couple classes a semester while also being a student in class. So I always tell people, I'm like, don't tell me to be humble. Like, if I could leave a class where I was the professor and come sit in a class and be the
That.
student, like within hours,
Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't need to be taught how to be humble. Like, just leave me
Hmm.
alone.
Let me pop my.
Leave me alone with all that,
Hmm.
And so like I really couldn't join a lot of clubs, and so like I ended up like trying the bull set at my school, and I
Mm.
remember like it just didn't work out. I think I was too different. I'm usually too different for most clubs, and so like for me, like I still told like I remember recommending it to people even if it didn't work out for me. I was like, listen,
Hmm.
like I am like an oddball. Like I don't even fit in some parts of my family. So
Mm.
if when strangers don't accept me, I'm like, welcome to the club, like and so but what I ended up doing was ended up being on like the corporate journal and also appellate moot court, and that's a
Hmm.
lot of work. Um,
I can
and
imagine.
they didn't intimate to me what the level of commitment that was. Um, and and herein lies the drama. And so we're working on a corporate. I'm working on my note. At that point, my note is like converted to like a type of manual for one of like the nonprofit legal services places in Brooklyn at the time. Like they're already using my notes in the real world, right?
Mm.
And so like I'm feeling myself, and then they tell me they're not gonna publish my note. And so I was like, but why not? And I think what ended up happening was they realized that like 2 year students weren't gonna be around for the third year to
Oh.
work on a journal. And so it just made more sense to like publish people made more sense. That's the story I'm gonna go with because I don't want to blow them up. But but I remember like I still had that one credit like where they expected me to like do reviews of other people's notes in the fall, like my final semester, and I wanted to take Crim Pro because I took like some investment class. The professor didn't realize it was a 2 credit class. He thought it was a 5 credit class based on the syllabus, and so I just couldn't take that class because it was just too much. I was like, no way, like this is gonna, and so and I figured that out like the first day, and I had trouble I couldn't get into Crim Pro because of the 1 credit I was still giving to journal at the time. And I went up the chain to get off journal. Like you hear about people trying to
Going up the
get
chain to get on.
up the chain to get it off my resume. And I remember that was like the final like nail in the coffin for that. Where I remember like the vice dean at the time, poor lady had to deal with me. Um, she was like, "Oh, I just want you to know that means you're not gonna be able to put it on your resume." I was like, "Oh, it's no problem. I already have a job. It'll be fine." Um, and like looking back, I'm like, "Who are you? Like that's who you were." But you know how it is. You get one of those big law jobs, and you start really feeling yourself, and
Yeah,
so it was
true.
one of and so like I ended up switching out of the journal so I could take Crim Pro, and I wanted to share that story less to like talk about how like I was a pain in the butt to the admin, but more to just kind of say like sometimes you have to make those kinds of sacrifices because I feel like we can get so hung up on these like because it's kind of a big deal to be on a journal. I think they forgot because I'm pretty sure I have a certificate that says I was on the journal from when I graduated, so I think they forgot all of that drama happened a little bit. But for me it's like sometimes you have to be willing to give up the thing that you want for the thing that you need. And for me, like I actually ended up needing to be in Crim Pro because I found out I was actually really good at it. One,
That's
it,
good.
it ended up being one of my A's that semester. And so it was one of those things where like I was not getting an A in that 2 credit class, and it was gonna and because of how much work was in that class, it was gonna probably tank other grades,
That you got right.
Yeah, and so it was one of those things where I had to just like although I knew I was gonna be a corporate attorney, like no, I'm gonna need Crim Pro for the bar, so I'm gonna take it. And so like I am so glad we got to like talk about our experiences.
Of course.
And like I would love to have you guys back in the summer.
Absolutely.
I hope you will want to return after
Yes.
Absolutely.
but I actually plan on having like first a big announcement about it. I'm having a series specifically for lawyers, for people going into law school, for greener attorneys, and for people who are pre-law who are thinking about going to law school, because I think like we're in a season right now where we can't have tunnel vision about what is available to us with a law degree. I know
Absolutely.
I made a decision in 2009 not to go to law school because I had a very limited perspective of what was available as an attorney. And yes, like I ended up getting a master's and becoming a professor, and like, like it ended up working out, but it doesn't
Hmm.
always work out, right?
Right.
And so for me, like part of the reason I want to have this programming, like I want to have, people that are lawyering in different venues, and like, and just having people tell about like their stories, and a range of people. So new people who are green, but also people who've been doing it for years,
Right.
who've had like 3 or 4 pivots in their careers. Because I think that's going to be really important, especially in this economic climate.
Yeah.
But before you ladies go, I want you to give 3 pieces of advice, to any first generation person that's listening. And if you want to get really specific, any first generation Black law student, attorney, like what would be your 3 things you either wish you knew or you knew and like think people need to know, to just have a leg up.
I can go.
Yeah.
Um, one thing I would say is while community matters, it is important to put yourself first. And what I mean by that is it is okay to not limit yourself to what you know.
Mhm.
Um, so that's one thing. The
Mhm.
second thing I would say is, as I mentioned before, stay faithful in your season because one, God will not bring you here just to be like, well, that's it. You got into law
Hmm.
school. That's it. That's
Mhm.
all. I'm done. And what I mean by that is, yes, there are going to be times where, like Lisa said, you up till 12, 2 o'clock in the morning studying and still got class the next day at 10 a.m. Do not take early classes if you can avoid them. But no, stay faithful in that season and know that you can do this.
Mhm.
And lastly, and but most importantly, you belong. No
Mhm.
matter what people may say, no matter where people may come from, whether they have family members that are attorneys, whether you are the first gen or the
Mhm.
12th gen, you belong. This is your moment, and do not allow anyone to silence you. Whether it is
Mm.
your own community, whether it is your professors, be an advocate for yourself. Because ultimately, if you cannot advocate for yourself, how are you going to be effective in
Ooh,
advocating for
that's a word. That's a word
Hmm.
right there.
Hmm. I love that.
All right,
I was
Lisa.
I was actually gonna say you belong, but I'm gonna let Leah have that one. I'll first start off by saying that take up space, take up as much space as you want. O- Overextend yourself in the
Mhm.
space, if you will, and don't ever make anyone make you feel small because
Mhm.
as we said, if you're there, it's because you belong there and you are more
Mhm.
than capable of staying there and then exiting on your own terms. So
Mhm.
that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say is always put your best foot forward. And I say that whether it's you submitting work, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's you sending an email, whether if it's a speaking engagement, whether it's you showing up for work and how you dress.
Mhm.
As long as you're authentic, make sure that it's your best authentic self.
Mhm.
Not you on your worst day, not you when you're not feeling like yourself, right? Always make sure that people are seeing the best in you because
Mhm.
you don't ever want to feel like you have any regrets with the person that you
Yeah.
showed up with on that day, right? And the last thing that I'll say is take it all in, right?
Mhm.
And that goes back to being present, right?
Mhm.
I last week I was driving to work, and I'm just going to share this story to emphasize this last
Mhm.
point about being grateful for where you are. I also took the LSAT multiple times to get into law school, right? Went through the whole law school journey, took
Mhm.
the whole et cetera. And I did it. I wanted to become an attorney and I really wanted this so bad. And now I'm living in it, right? And then I
Mhm.
found myself complaining about, some of my very, very voice outspoken clients.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, Lord, They are trying me today, Lord.
Your
Oh my God.
children.
They're trying me today. And then I was just like, I had to stop. I was in the middle of a dry, and I was just like, wow, there was a day in time that you begged God to put you in this position. I mean, literally begged. I got down on my knees and I prayed to get into law school, and I prayed to take the bar and to pass the bar and then to get sworn in because I thought there were so many obstacles in the way.
Yeah.
And then to
Mhm.
finally be in this moment, I felt like, how dare you be ungrateful to be here when this is all you ever wanted, right? And this is not the end of the show.
Yeah.
So this is
Oh
just a stepping
no.
stone,
That's so
right?
good. Like, ooh, I'm so glad I let you guys go first because you have better ones than mine. Um, but I really want to actually hit home the you belong. I think like there are a lot of people that are graduating law school in about a month, right? And like you made it. Like you've made it. No one can take that law degree away from you. Like it's yours for the taking. Like whether you choose to use it as a lawyer or something else, like it is yours. And like even if you don't pay your student loans, what are you gonna do? Take your degree back? They can't do that. One of my friends, one of my attorney friends said that to me a while back, and I had to just drop that in there. I can't be too serious for too long. But like it's yours. Like it's just something you've done. And the second thing I want to say is like if you're first, like you've just created a gateway. Like
Don't be last.
you've just created a portal. Like this is not one of those moments where you plug the hole. Like this is
Right.
one of those moments where you get some dynamite and you blow it up,
Yes.
Amen.
and you let anyone you can help along the way. I'm not saying you need to spread yourself thin. I mean, like I do, like the way I work is if I have the info
I'll
and
share it.
you happen to cross my path, in my mind, I'm supposed to give you that info.
Hmm.
I don't have time to have you waste time because I had to do a lot to get to
Right.
where I got to. I
Right.
had to figure out too many things. And then my final thing is, something that Leah hit on, like kind of broadening your vista, like, you know, because you're the first, you don't really know what is there, right?
Hmm.
You don't really know, like, and especially like if you're in a predominantly white space, right? Like, you know, don't that taking up space that Lisa said, like, is so important. But I'll share this story and then I'll, stop having the Pharaoh anointing and let these people go. But I found out about my big law opportunity. I found out about big law my like towards the end of the fall of my of it was like technically my second semester of law school because I started in May of that year in the 2-year program, and like so I already had a set of grades in, and the person who told me about it was like the smartest person in the school, hands
Hmm.
down. And the way he said it made me realize he thought we were on equal footing because he just kind of looked at me in this matter of fact way on an elevator and he was like, "You're going to be doing big law too, right?" And like it was the first time I had heard the words.
Hmm.
And I remember looking at him, in all my glory and pride, and I was like, "Sure looks like it." Um and and then I hightailed as soon as we got to the floor for our class. I hightailed to the bathroom to find out what this big law stuff was all about. Because I was like, if I can't keep bluffing for long, because I was so clueless. And I remember just kind of like the initial search and being like, wait, what? What is this?
Hmm.
Why didn't I know? Why aren't they advertising this? And that completely changed the trajectory of
Hmm.
what was available to me. I too was public interest,
Hmm.
but I was actually having a hard time getting public interest opportunities. In fact,
Hmm.
somebody had to phone a friend
Mm.
to get me a public interest opportunity that I needed
Wow.
for my Sparrow Public Interest Fellowship that
Wow.
I was required to have one. So like somebody had to phone a friend kind of thing. And it was bizarre because the thing I went to law school wanting the most, it was almost like God was like, no, girl, I got other plans for you.
Yeah.
Because when I did OCI, I had 12 interviews. I had 3 callbacks. I got my first choice. Like it was like, and everything was so smooth. Um, and I ended up doing a ton of pro bono work. I think I clocked something like probably 4,000 pro bono hours in my in my 4 years in big law, right? And I was doing my billables too for anybody. But all that to say, like you got a plan, right? And and we just have to take up this space, like Lisa said, right? We have to plan,
Absolutely.
and we just have to remember that, like, we have to hold ourselves first before we try to hold anybody else. I think that's so important when you're first gen. So thank you,
Absolutely.
ladies, so
Wait,
much.
Aubria, before we go, can I just say one more thing? And I'm sorry, Lisa, to like pick up your time, but there's one
No,
more
you're
thing I
good.
would like to say.
At least say if you got one more thing, you can say your one more thing too.
Be perfect. All I'm going to say is do not despise small beginnings. Sometimes we feel like our journey is going to go one way and we see
Mhm.
other people, it's going to what we wanted, we're seeing for that other person.
Mhm.
Um, there is a verse in the Bible that says, rejoice with those who are rejoicing. And
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by that is do not allow yourself to not be able to
Mhm.
rejoice or to be able to be that person that pushes another person because
Mhm.
you are not getting what you want in this season, because you do not know how everything can come back full circle, as
Yeah.
Lisaann said,
Mhm.
where that person, maybe you were pushing them and just excited for them,
Mhm.
where they can attest to your character, where they can
Yeah.
like say, hey, I remember
Absolutely.
this person, because we don't know
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
what people are going
Mhm.
through. So do
Yeah.
not despise your small beginning. And it's when I say small, I don't mean like small, like it's nothing. I mean like, okay, you thought you were going to get a B, you got to see this person got an A. Look at it as, okay, what can I do to
Mhm.
help
Room for
this
growth.
person? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just always look at it as, you know what, as long as I see somebody else doing well, I too
Mhm.
can do well as well. And I'm not going to get jealous. I'm just going to say, you know what, God, my journey is my journey, whatever that may look like. It may
Yeah.
be
Mm-hmm.
some tooths and nails going along in it, but we're going to get through it. And
Yes,
that's
for
all I
Mm-hmm.
want to say.
sure. Final words, Lisa Ann.
I will just say, and I think this kind of dovetails everything that was
Mhm.
just said, and it is a bit of an advice. Once you make it, whatever the make it is, whether it's
Mhm.
passing the class, whether it's the externship, internship, the job
Mhm.
opportunity, or even graduating, hold the door open. I
Yes.
can't tell you like how many times I've seen a person want someone to hold the door
Mhm.
open for them, but then when they get there, they forget and they end up
Yes.
closing
Mhm.
the door behind them.
Mhm.
And I think it's so important to spread the sand along the way, because
Mhm.
even if you're not there in that moment, at least leave bits and pieces
Yeah.
to for the next person that's coming behind you,
Mhm.
right? I mentor pre-law students, I mentor law students, and I always say, like, listen, I ain't nothing but a repost on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, just
Yeah.
for you to get the information, for me to
Mhm.
send a copy and paste to you just because
Exactly.
I saw it. And it doesn't have to be a big brand act that you have to
Mhm.
talk about, or a panel or a
Yeah.
podcast. It could be something as small as saying, hey, I saw this article. I think you might
Mhm.
be great for this. So definitely recommend holding the door open and being that person for someone else that you wanted for yourself.
Mhm.
Yes.
Can't stress that enough.
Yeah, and there you have it, guys. All the wisdom from these very green attorneys and they're already showing you they ready. They ready to spread the wisdom, spread the
Mhm.
wealth, hold the door open. You know where to find them. Hit the follow button. Show them some
Absolutely.
love. I really appreciate you ladies being here and sharing
Thank
your time with
you.
me. I do not take that lightly. All right, guys. Have a good